Okay, so I'm currently making a critical race theory video, uh, potentially my first video on YouTube, and I thought it might be fun to take a break and, well, watch another video about critical race theory from Vaush. So, let's just jump in.
My wonderful friends, what is critical race theory? A question many have asked, mostly conservatives, by the way, because they have no idea. Anyway, we run through PragerU every once in a while, but the reason why I'm specifically excited about this one is because the person who's heading it, okay? Get ready for it, people. Come on, show me.
Have you heard about critical race theory?
I have.
I'm guessing you probably have.
True.
It has already insinuated itself into many
Yep, that's James Lindsay, people. Who here knows who James Lindsay is?
I know who he is. He's the guy behind, well, one of the guys behind the bogus grievance studies getting published, to show that the peer review process in academia is basically total and complete shit. All right. Right here we see they managed to get 4 published prior to the hoax being uncovered. And just look at these titles. I mean, that they'll basically tell you everything you need to know about these studies. Human reactions to rape culture and queer performativity at urban dog parks in Portland, Oregon. Who are they to judge? Overcoming anthropometry and a framework for fat bodybuilding. Going in through the back door, challenging straight male homohysteria and transphobia through receptive penetrative sex toy use. And an ethnography of restaurant masculinity, themes of objectification, sexual conquest, male control, and masculine toughness in a sexually objectifying restaurant. I want to point out that he got all 4 of these. Well, they got all 4 of these published. These went through the peer review process. Totally fake, bogus studies, and were published purely. Some would argue because of they promoted the right politics.
Come on. Any of you? James Lindsay is a really silly guy. If anyone follows him on Twitter, it's really good content. He talks about 2 things, okay? He talks about critical race theory and the woke. It's always the woke, by the way.
This is absolutely true. Though this video is a little dated, nowadays he talks about vaccine mandates too, and vaccines in general, so I guess it might be more accurate to say 3 things.
Not woke, whatever, it's the woke. The same way that, like, a cryptic mad prophet from, like, the 3rd century BC would talk about how the orbit of the moon foretells the death of an emperor, you know? He sounds like an absolute nut job on social media, and he tweets constantly. I mean, he's always on Twitter. I don't know how they pull...
Yeah, he's always on Twitter when he's not swinging his sword, at least. But he doesn't sound like a nut job. He makes really good points, and you're not going to be able to just dismiss those with ad homs.
Pulled the phone out of his hands for this PragerU bit, but, you know... He'll say the wildest shit. And the shit he says, by the way, makes no sense. He'll say something like, the woke discourse in academia is analogous to the means by which the... Yeah, like, oh wait, hold on. Why do I don't need to make fun of him. He just does this himself. Yeah. Based is the opposite of woke. Anti-woke won't cut it. It's time to get based. A manifesto for the based. I'm gonna be real with you. This is pretty cringe.
Yeah, I find it a little bit cringy, but I mean, he's just speaking in memes. It's what you do. It's what I do. It's what we all fucking do. It's Twitter.
It's a virgin move right here. Okay, yeah, you guys saw this? You saw this got retweeted? Yeah. This guy, yeah. This guy's well, I actually encountered him, not based on his deranged ramblings about the woke or whatever. I actually encountered him back in the day because he posted some article about how nobody on the left is willing to debate anymore, or like at all, which is of course basically like throwing red meat into an arena full of ravenous boars and all the lefty debate bros.
Yeah, that was probably true back in the day. Back in like 2016, 2017, it did feel like the left didn't want to participate in discussion. That's not really true now, though. It does seem like the right is more hesitant to debate. Probably because they're afraid they'll get canceled.
Will run out there to, engage, and a bunch of them, because there were only so many lefty debate types. James Lindsay was like, when they started showing up there, he was like, who even are you? You don't have enough followers to debate me. And then I showed up. I had some followers. And he said, is that a cartoon picture for your Twitter avatar? Take this seriously. So it's like, nobody on the left will debate. And he's right. I don't take him too seriously. Nobody on the left will debate. Now, let me spend 6 hours today on Twitter explaining to 73 lefty debate bros why I don't care enough to debate them. And, Anyway.
Move on, yeah.
Critical race theory, huh? Why do conservatives get so mad over critical race theory?
Because
I'm
it
gonna make
fucking
some
sucks.
predictions in this video, okay? This video is going to describe critical race theory in a couple of ways, okay? We're going to start out with a couple of broad definitions that are sort of accurate when they talk about how critical race theory boils race relations down to power relations, victim and victor, that sort of thing, which is simplistic, but at least it's in the right direction. And then as we go further on, it's going to turn into about 3 minutes, I'd say. About 60% of this video is going to be about the those federal employee training programs that taught white people it's bad to be white.
Okay. I've actually watched the PragerU video before, the James Lindsay video, and well, I'm not usually one to defend PragerU. They're pretty despicable. This video I remember being factually accurate. Now, of course, I'll give Vaush a chance to explain why he thinks it's not, but I'm skeptical he'll be able to.
That's going to be most of it. I'm going to say the vast majority of this video is going to be fear-mongering about a tiny minority of a liberal application of critical race theory, rather.
It's not a tiny minority. I mean, it's only fucking all of mainstream media, academia, the entire, basically, entire corporations are subscribing to this ideology. Politicians are now pushing it. This isn't a tiny minority, and that framing, that framing's fucking awful.
Rather than the actual ideology. So what we're going to do is we're going to watch this video, we're going to make fun of it, and then I'm going to explain what critical race theory is. Won't that be fun? We can all learn together. Okay?
It's going to be amazing.
You'll all learn, because I'll be saying it, but,
I don't think I'll learn, but who knows, maybe.
I learned from teaching.
Institutions and is making rapid progress into others. If it takes hold, it will completely change the very nature of America and the way you live.
Oh,
it will, and it has.
Race theory holds that the most important thing about you is your race.
No.
The color of your skin. That's who you are. Not your
No. Critical race theory doesn't make any prescriptive judgments about how important race is to you. That's
not what he said. He didn't say how important race is to you. He didn't make a prescriptive judgment about that. He made a descriptive judgment about race being your most important characteristic, which critical race theory does.
Not true. I mean, it holds the belief that race is an important component of how people treat each other, but that's descriptive, not prescriptive. There's
You just gonna reword his points? Like, disagree with him and reword what he has to say?
saying that is the case, not that that should be the case. I think most critical race theorists would argue, I think, in favor of racial abolition if they go down the path far enough,
No, they wouldn't. I mean, the original critical race theorists were highly sympathetic to black nationalism.
behavior, not your values, not your environment, your race.
That's not true.
In critical race theory, if you are a member of a minoritized racial group, their term, not mine,
Is it?
you are a
Yeah.
victim of a system that is rigged against you,
True.
a system that doesn't want you to succeed.
True. Yeah. It's
On
true.
the other hand, if your race is privileged, you're an exploiter, whether you intend to be or not. Critical race theory.
So this point is a little bit nuanced. Okay.
It's not nuanced, Vaush. I mean, this point is accurate. You can try to explain it in a way that's more palatable to your audience, but it is an accurate point. This critical race theory teaches that if you're white, you're participating within whiteness. So whether you like it or not, you are a racist. I mean, this is where like the how to be an racist teachings originate. It's because they're saying that you can't escape being a racist.
Okay, we're going to need to engage in a little bit of nuance, all right? Everyone, get your stretch out a little bit, okay? So sometimes you'll hear arguments from progressive people saying that, like, the whites are always exploiting, even if they're not personally racist, even if you never personally benefited from the labor of a slave directly under your employ or control, I guess, because you didn't employ slaves. You still benefit from the systems of power that those things took place in. And that's
Some people do. Not all.
true. So I'm a white guy. I have never, this is to my knowledge, okay, I've never owned a slave, and, you know, don't think so.
I hope that you would know that, Vaush.
I have no reason to believe so, even. But the wealth that my family holds and the benefits that my grandpappy and my great-grandpappy and what have you were able to take advantage of were molded, in part at least, by the fact that they would have had a slightly easier time about it than they would have if they were black, you know? Now, that doesn't mean every white person is, like, living some godly privileged life where they're sitting...
Yeah, because here's the thing is my great-grandpappy slaved away in a coal mine his entire life. I mean, he had black lung. He still lived a pretty good life. I mean, he lived into his 80s, but, you know, that stuck with him forever. And it's pretty brutal work. And it's hard to argue that someone like him benefited from what was going on elsewhere in the country. I mean, he was pretty isolated. I'm sure, as a anti-capitalist, you're aware of what would occur in these coal mines and how people were often trapped there by being paid scrip instead of actual cash. But I don't know. I guess it doesn't matter.
on a golden throne being carried around by POC or anything. It just means, like, if I look back through my family history and I think, like, where would I be today if my great-great-grandfather, who immigrated here from Poland, if he had been black and had been a recently freed slave instead? And, like...
I don't know. It's plenty of black people do well. Do you think they don't? Are you saying black people can't succeed?
everything else was kept the same, but like that. And I have to think, probably would have been a little different. Probably would have been a little harder for you know, my descendants from that point forward. And maybe I wouldn't have gotten to go to Beverly Hills High School, you know? Just...
Oh, so that explains a lot. You grew up with a silver spoon in your mouth, a life of privilege, and you're trying to figure out why. So for you, maybe. For us working class men and women, I don't know. I don't know that slavery had a positive impact for us, so I don't know how you can say we're benefiting from that system.
Maybe not. Maybe, possibly. It's all a stats game. When you're talking about thousands and millions of people, when you're talking about racial biases in relation to that number of people, it's not really about any individual's benefit. It's about broad statistical predictions. But this isn't prescriptive. This doesn't mean that white people are guilty. It doesn't mean white people are doing anything wrong, you know. If you're born into a system that kind of likes you a little bit because of your skin.
Yeah, it just means you're guilty for being white. That's what it means. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. You could be doing everything right, but you're still guilty for being white.
Skin color, that doesn't make you a bad person, but it's probably something you should recognize, you know? Probably something you should think about for a little bit, at least.
Critical race theory begins from the assumption that racism occurs in all interactions. To see how this works, consider this thought experiment. Imagine you own a shop and two customers enter at the same time, one white and one black.
Okay.
Who do you help first?
Wait. The ordinary American cashier would help the person as they in the order in which they entered the store. But a
I agree, but I don't think you're getting his point.
critical race theorist would always prioritize helping the black person because of this. Is that really where we're going? That's
No, it's not.
where we're going right now, isn't it? This is the best thought experiment they could come up with.
If you help the black person first, critical race theory would say you did so because you don't trust black people to be left alone in your store.
What? Wait, it was even stupider than what I thought it was going to be.
It is stupid, but this is what they believe.
What? If you help the black person first, it's because you want to get them out of there as quickly as you can. If you want to help the white person first, that means that you trust white people more and you like talking to white people and you hate talking to black people. What are you talking about? Well, I'll hand it to these guys. I can't prove a negative, but I have never seen a critical race theorist say this, and I don't think they have either.
I mean, I have. I'm sure you have. Basically find every leftist ever making both of these fucking arguments on Twitter every day. And I've even seen these arguments pop up in, employee training and, diversity and inclusion awareness trainings. So, I don't know why you're taking an issue with this complaint.
In fact, I'm going to go so far as to say that nobody has ever said this. That if you trawl through the millions and billions of stupid, dumbfuck lefties,
you'll find a ton of people saying it.
Twitter posts, you will never find anything like this, okay? I challenge James Lindsay to go scrolling through Twitter to find some 2-like tweet from a 14-year-old, okay? And explain to me how they based their understanding of critical race theory off that tweet.
That's racist. If you help the white person first instead, critical race theory would say you did so because you think blacks are second-class citizens.
What?
That's racist too.
Okay, just to be perfectly clear, okay? If anyone, I invite conservatives to think about this for a second. Do you really believe that an academic discipline is so? They do believe this. I don't know why I'm asking, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you really believe that an academic discipline is just a bunch of catch-22s where you're racist no matter what you do, and the entire purpose of that discipline is just to explain to white people that no matter what choice they make, if you see a black person...
Yes, a lot of people believe that. It may not be as bad as some people make it out to be, but there's certainly a reason that so many people feel like they can't voice their opinions or do certain things without being canceled. Might be why so many of them don't want to debate you. But yeah, you can't say this isn't happening. Unless you're discounting their lived experiences. And I thought your side was all for, listening to people's lived experiences.
And coming at you down the street in the sidewalk, do you stay on your side of the sidewalk or do you go to the other sidewalk? If you go to the other sidewalk, you're racist because you want to avoid interaction with black people. But if you stay on your side of the sidewalk, you're actually being double racist because you're overcompensating for the fact that your white biology wants you to move to the other side of the sidewalk. It's interesting because I think that the PragerU people are projecting a bit of their racism onto this analysis. For example, the only way their critical race theory analogy would make sense is if the shop tender in this example...
This is the perfect lefty defense. Instead of actually, really, really critiquing the points and saying, does critical race theory teach this? You're just gonna call them racist. Fair enough, I guess.
Was white, but they didn't specify that, did they? They just kind of assumed it, which is interesting to say the least. The only way these catch-22s work is if you're under the impression that people are inherently racist, and critical race theory exists to point that out. I just don't know which direction we're going with this.
That's critical race theory. It can find racism in anything, even if it has to read your mind to do it. Critical race theory...
Well, to be fair, the only way you could ever see racism is to infer it. People don't say they're racist, or at least very few people do. If there's racist behavior, you
There's certainly plenty of people do. Have you logged on Twitter lately?
have to use inference to determine whether or not it's motivated by some, racist preconceptions.
Is a uniquely American invention. Brewed up at Harvard Law School in the 70s, now part of the academic and media mainstream, it is also...
Wait. Okay, hold on. Wait. One piece of misinformation at a time. Okay, hold
Critical
on.
race theory is a uniquely American invention.
Okay.
Yes.
As I understand it, critical race theory, as it's understood today, has its philosophical roots in a wide range of European academics.
Yes, but it was all pieced
I'm
together.
pretty sure, isn't this stuff often tied to the...
It was all pieced together in America. I mean, these aren't incompatible statements, Vaush. Like, obviously it was founded on, well, I'm sure we'll get to there, but Marxism, and that's obviously very un-American.
The Frankfurt School, but the Frankfurt School was like, they were
Yeah,
Europeans.
critical theory comes from the Frankfurt School.
I mean, you could say that this originated in America, but you know what else did? Everything! It's goddamn America!
Brewed up
Point of agreement there. A little America-centric, but I like your patriotism.
at Harvard Law School in the 70s, now part of the academic and media mainstream.
That's not true at all.
What's not true? It came from Harvard Law School. Derek Bell, his students. What's not true?
Critical race theory is an idea that's banted about in the humanities. The idea that it's like the holistic totality of academic or media mainstream. This is not true. It's not even...
Dude, it's fucking everywhere. Like, I don't know why you're acting like it's not. I mean, even the writers themselves, they went on to say that it originated in law school, but had infiltrated other fields. What are you arguing against? That's what they said. They acknowledged that in 1990. When was that book written? Like 1995 or 1996.
remotely true.
It is also uniquely un-American because it
Oh.
rejects the core tenets of the American classically liberal Judeo-Christian value system.
You know,
Yeah, this is true. Like, I mean, you could really scratch that Judeo-Christian value part out. Well, leave the value, but scratch out the Judeo-Christian, and that's probably the truest statement. It doesn't really seem concerned with religion so much as it does liberalism, like American liberalism.
this is a bit apropos of nothing, but I like the fact that the PragerU people keep using the term Judeo-Christian, in spite of the fact that that doesn't actually mean anything. Christians have spent
It definitely has meaning. You may not like that, but it does.
the past 2,000 years dumping on Jews. The only reason they say Judeo-Christian is because they want to evoke the aesthetic of Christian nationalism, but Dennis Prager is Jewish.
That's not why they're called Judeo-Christian values. They're called that because both societies had similar value sets based upon their religions. Because both religions come from the same books, largely. That's why. I mean, yes, they were at odds with each other. Yes, sometimes they still are. Not commonly, but occasionally. But the values they share are very similar.
That's literally the only reason why. If Dennis Prager wasn't Jewish, they would just say Christian values. But because they want to rope him in on it,
No, they wouldn't. People have said Judeo-Christian values for years, Vaush.
they invent the term Judeo-Christian in
They
spite
didn't invent the term.
of the fact that, oh boy, we did not get along. Jews and Christians, those two, whew.
They didn't invent the term. Like, I remember someone saying, or Hyde in that 70s show said he respected Judeo-Christian values. And that was in, like, the early 2000s. They didn't invent the term. Been around for a while.
Sorry, when I phrase it that way, it makes it sound like this was kind of a blow for blow type thing. That's not true at all. In case you ever wonder, by the way, why people still get so up in arms about anti-Semitism, you should take a look at the rate of hate crimes against Jewish people in the United States of America. It is massively disproportional to their population. I actually didn't believe it because I grew up with a lot
You're not going to say where it's coming from, I bet.
of Jews in like a nice neighborhood, so like nothing really happened. But if you actually look at it, like Jewish people, synagogues, all that shit, they get an unbelievable amount of hate crime done against them. It's wild. Why does everyone hate Jewish people, Vaush? Jewish people kind of have, there's a lot of inertia.
Because they're successful. As a culture, they've largely done well. And that's why people hate them.
The conspiracy. Far-right groups tend to be conspiratorial because they tend to be individually pathetic and they need some kind of collective other to blame their personal problems on. And because Jews are widely...
It's not just the far right. There's one thing that communists and fascists can agree upon is hating Jews.
Spread around what we would broadly call the Western world. B, already largely hated, and C, widely misunderstood. It's really easy to just push a bunch of conspiracy nonsense onto them, you know?
It turns the bedrock American idea upside down.
Oh.
Here it is in the words of Richard Delgado and Gene Stefanchik, two leading proponents.
Oops, there goes gravity.
Critical race theory questions the very foundations of the liberal order, including equality theory.
Wait, wouldn't PragerU think questioning equality theory is based?
Legal reasoning,
No.
Enlightenment rationalism, and the neutral principles of constitutional law.
So this is a completely inoffensive statement that if we...
I mean, it's inoffensive if you're a Marxist. If you're a American or a capitalist or a patriot or whatever, it's a pretty terrible fucking statement, Vaush.
Look at and think about for like 6 seconds, you'd think we'd be okay with. So first of all, the liberal order is something that PragerU spends every video whining about. So
No, doesn't. This is why I fucking hate the way Americans, and I am American, so whatever, but this is why I hate the way they portray this. Liberalism doesn't mean the Democratic Party. Not at all. Liberalism means, like, free speech, free association, free thought. It means protecting your rights. That's what the government serves. It's what our country is built upon. Now, it's not always been perfect, but to question those foundational theories, it's pretty offensive. And to be honest, I don't even know how you could question them.
I don't know why they take issue with this. Shouldn't they think this is based, you know? Including equality theory. Equality theory in this case refers to the liberal conceptualization of equality. Again, this is something that PragerU shouldn't have an issue with because they argue against it all the time.
No, they don't. He means equality theory and that people should be treated equally by the law and by others, despite their, immutable characteristics, such as race and shit. This isn't something that conservatives object to.
Legal reasoning, well, sure, legal reasoning is, every society has their own legal framework. It's hardly an inherent or objective legal framework out there. Enlightenment rationalism.
Critical race theory doesn't try to be objective. It says that you can't. So...
PragerU literally has a video against the Enlightenment and Enlightenment liberals. PragerU actually...
Maybe. I don't know. Probably. I don't doubt it, but James Lindsay doesn't. So critique these points.
Made a video saying that the most influential and important people from the Enlightenment were the conservatives, who nobody remembers anymore because their ideas were dog shit, and all of the ideas that actually got taken and used were the ones from the liberals, and America was literally built off the ideas from those liberal Enlightenment rationalists. And then the neutral principles of constitutional law. Oh, and by the way, fuck the Constitution, okay? Constitution's dumb as shit. Didn't even X out slavery to begin with. You kidding me? All men are created equal. Slap that legal document down. Still got slaves? Get out of here. Come on. Come on.
Wasn't perfect.
It does this because critical race theory proponents assume racism is present everywhere and always.
They do.
Why can't you find a quote of them saying that? And if you could, by the way, there are
Dude,
ways to contextualize that as well. It's just
they
funny
say
that
that it's everywhere.
Like that they should by no rights have problems with, and then like not even discuss it. And
they do. They say this. They make this claim all the time. That racism is everywhere. This is why they say it's in your unconscious. This is the purpose, the point of unconscious racism and implicit biases, is to say that it impacts everything you do. whether you know it or not.
And just go right on to another point?
And they look for it critically until they find it.
That's what critical race theory means. We're critical of racism. We're observing.
No.
This is like the you're a reactionary because you react to things all over again. Are you kidding me?
That's
Oh my god.
not that funny, Vaush.
Yeah, this floor is made of floor.
Glad you're
And they
amused.
always find it.
Oh.
It has to be there because that's how the imperial European powers and then America set things up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I mean, hey, you know, you said it, not me.
No,
Here,
the
as in
critical.
all dangerous academic
The founders said it.
theories, there is a kernel of truth.
Oh.
Human beings were not preoccupied with race until the 16th century, when Europeans began to explore and then colonize other parts of the world.
Very disturbing news out of Vernon Central High School.
What's going on?
Not technically accurate. There were plenty of racial theories that existed before the 16th century. What he's referring to right now is the modern scientific conceptualization of race. And when I say scientific, I'm doing it with very large air quotes.
Yeah, I don't know why you're taking this.
Pseudoscientific conceptualization of
That
race.
is what he's referring to.
It's interesting because admitting this runs contrary to the contents of many other videos of theirs, but
not James Lindsay's. Critique his points. This isn't about PragerU. I fucking hate PragerU too. We can shit on them some other time. Address this video.
okay. I'm pretty sure I remember PragerU making videos on inherent human tribalism before and using it as a justification for some degree of like racialized, like the understanding that people are going to be like nationalistic or like they didn't say like racial bias, but they flew past it with cultural bias, which I mean, we know what they're saying. Oh, and if anyone's curious why this took place, the simple reason for this is humans have had like really wild ideas about what made different groups of humans different for basically as long as we've existed. You know, if you go back far enough, of course, we coexisted with Neanderthals, in which case there was an extremely real, very biologically inset difference between us and other, you know, and them. But obviously Neanderthals didn't last long. And excuse me. Given enough time,
we killed them all.
as human
fucked them.
beings spread out around the world, we found people who looked different than us. People had wild theories. Some people were like, I think it was Aristotle who believed that it was about blood thickness, that the Arabians had thin blood, which made them clever, but also darkened their skin. And the Nordics had thick blood, which made them dull-witted, but very courageous, or something like that. Like, just some truly wild... And if you go all around the world, like, the Chinese had their own ideas of what made different races, and the Africans had their... Just like the whole... This is all over the place, you know?
Like, is there going to be a test on this? Because I'm not really sure how this is relevant to the video. He's obviously speaking about, like, the current scientific conceptualization of race. He's not speaking about the fucking theories that were held by cultures all around the world 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, some truly bloodborne shit, you know? Yeah, Aristotle was the one who founded the city of Yarnum and the Healing Church, where he discovered... Yeah. Anyway, so one of the issues was, back in the day, the idea that black people were inferior to white people was not like this massive commonly held concept. People were more nationalistic than that. It was more like Anglos versus Franks, if that makes more sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm generalizing a bit here, but
It was more down to cultural
then we started
lines.
the transatlantic slave trade. And here's the thing, okay? People felt real bad about it. You can find writings on this. It turns out there's just something really damaging to the human spirit about participating in the enslavement and slaughter of millions of people. You know, some of them, they just got those heart pangs, those Europeans, you know, they carrying all these Africans over across the ocean. They're thinking, So they needed a theory to post hoc justify their treatment of black people. And what they hit upon eventually was the pseudoscientific conceptualization of black, white people, and what have you being genetically different from one another. It wasn't some conceptual, spiritual thing. It was direct physiological genetic differences, and that whites were better than blacks, and that justified our treatment of them. And if you take a look at when these ideas emerged, the dehumanization corresponded almost directly with the social need for dehumanization. That is to say, our modern understanding of race was born not of science, but rather of people using science to quell guilt. Again, this is a fair simplification, but I think that's a decent, simple reading of the history of the modern conceptualization of race.
Drawing distinctions between the races reached its peak in the 19th century with the widespread use of slave labor in North and South America. No one denies this.
Wait, okay, wait. No.
Nobody who fucking matters denies it. I don't care if some white nationalist in Vermont thinks that, is talking about how none of this happened or something while smoking meth in his mom's basement. Nobody that fucking matters is denying that this happened. Everybody accepts this.
All of you deny that. Hold on. I've had this argument with a lot of conservatives, and yet conservatives do not believe what you just said. You do not get to stand on the cliff's edge for years and then back off, run away from it while screaming nobody's ever been stupid enough to run up the edge of the cliff. Come on. Yeah, you're losing the radical right now. Come on.
Since then, the Western world, and most especially America, has spent a lot of time, money, and blood breaking free of its racist past.
Oh.
It's been a rocky road for sure, but great
and we've broken free now.
Progress has been made. Critical race theory says all this progress is a mirage.
And it does. It says that we only enact change for the benefit of white people. This is something that Bell believed very strongly. That's why he believed that you couldn't solve racism. He believed that it would never be solved, because the only way to get anything done was to appeal to white people.
Racism never died, never even faded a little bit. It just hid itself better.
True. I mean, dog. James Lindsay voted for Trump, I assume. Trump literally went up there and did a speech on how Black Lives Matter was going to invade the suburbs. The 1776 commission that he, commissioned and briefly had up on the White House website was essentially a refutation of what they referred to as critical race theory. And in doing so, they didn't even mention slavery.
Yes, they did, I believe. I mean, it's literally right here. Challenges to America's principles. Slavery.
Sean has an excellent video on this, but sorry, refutation, not repudiation, my bad. They didn't even mention slavery in it. They do this whole thing on like the history of America, and they refer to slavery as a challenge to America's values, like it came from somewhere else, like it was an invading.
It is a challenge to those values. The values that we hold in our Constitution are anti-slavery. Yes, we kept slaves. No conservative is denying this. We failed to live up to the values that we purported to. So yes, it is a challenge. We're not saying it came from somewhere else, though it did. I mean, there's been slavery in the entire history of fucking humanity, but you're totally missing the point, Vaush.
Force. They said, here are some challenges to American values: slavery, progressivism, socialism, and fascism. Like these are invading forces from.
Well, they are now. They've invaded, and now they've taken over pretty much everything. Well, not fascism so much, but socialism and progressivism definitely have.
Without, wait, didn't I hear you shit-talking Sean a few days ago? Yeah, and you'll hear it again in a few days more, but always about his Twitter account. So like America was like la-di-da, like walking down the street, and then slavery attacked, and we had to like beat it off. No, I would say that racism is alive and well. Oh, and
Yeah.
by the way, please keep this in mind, okay? Conservatives have been moving this post forward for 2 centuries now, okay? This argument, it's always the same argument, okay? America was racist, but now we're not. They said that after the slaves were freed. They said, we have committed ourselves to the abolition of slavery, and in doing so, we have truly gotten rid of racism in America. Separate but equal? Hey, it's equal. Happy days. And back during the civil rights movement in the 1960s, people made James Lindsay's argument over here. Sure, America used to be racist.
Funny thing about this is Bill didn't take issue with separate but equal. Critical race theory believed that separate but equal was largely okay. That they simply just needed better schools within their own neighborhoods. They opposed integration. I would assume you do too, Vaush, but apparently you don't realize that they oppose this.
But today, it's not. They would say this to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They would say this to civil rights protesters. And of course, there was still racism. And at least legally, they got rid of that discrimination.
Yeah,
and nowadays,
the important
today,
thing.
in the modern era, the discrimination that people of color face is not very overt, and it's not very legally evident. There aren't...
Here's the thing. Like, yes, racism still exists. But I don't know how you get rid of it completely, because you're never going to change, like, everybody's mind. All you can do is make discrimination illegal. And we've done that. And you can try to educate people better, but what you shouldn't do is fucking yell at them for being white. You're just going to make them racist.
Laws saying, like, black people suck, nah. But just because it's not as overt doesn't mean it's not obvious if you take, like, 3 seconds to look at it. This is one of the reasons why there's no point in ever paying attention to James Lindsay's shitposting on Twitter. It's because people who are anti-woke and anti-critical race theory aren't just opposed to some ideas or modes of behavior. They're opposed to the recognition that racism exists at all in the modern world. If you were hearing criticisms from a person who could say, oh, I recognize America still has racism. However, I still take issue with this tenet and this tenet of critical race theory, maybe I could pay a little more attention to it. Because at least they're willing to accept the premises. Okay? But
if you could find one prominent conservative saying basically what you said, that there is zero racism in this country at all, I'd be pretty impressed, Vaush. But I don't see that. That's not something I'm seeing coming out of the Republican Party. And believe me, there's plenty of shit to critique there, but they're not saying there was never racism. Or that there's no more racism at all.
This right here, this would be like a criticism of general relativity from a flat earther. Does that make sense? That's what we're watching right now. The idea that America doesn't still contain racism in it, institutional racism, is a delusional perspective. It is a perspective held by madmen, people with something foundationally wrong with their ability to critically engage with the world. Okay? And much in that way, would you listen to a criticism of general relativity from a flat earther? I mean, maybe there are some issues with general relativity, but is that the person you want to listen to?
I mean, no, but that's not an actual critique of, like, their ideas. That's a fallacy. That's you're like, that's not that's avoid. I forget what the fallacy's called, but you're avoiding their arguments by critiquing their character, and that's fallacious. Not that they have good arguments about the Earth being flat, but they might about the theory of relativity. I don't know.
For those criticisms? Probably not. They probably have their own biases going in there.
Critical race theory, therefore, is not a continuation of the civil rights movement. It is, in fact, a repudiation of it.
They can say this because Martin Luther King Jr. is, of course, dead. Most of the...
They can say this because it's true. They opposed they opposed most of what was occurring in the civil rights movement. I mean, like I've said, they opposed integration. They didn't really oppose separate but equal. of course it's true that they opposed the civil rights movement. They weren't happy with it. That's why critical race theory exists. It's because they didn't like that the change didn't happen faster.
The tenets expressed by critical race theory are basically in line with what Martin Luther King Jr. believed in. Martin Luther King Jr.
Well, critical race theory is Marxist, and Martin Luther King Jr. believed Marxism to be bad, so I think it's safe to say he would find some disagreement.
was not of the opinion that racism could be solved with the passage of the Civil Rights Act. He was a radical socialist and a believer that America owed a great debt.
He was not a radical socialist. He critiqued communism as much as he critiqued capitalism, if not more so. He believed it to be a great threat to people of all races.
To the black people in its population, and I guess the black people all around the world, really. And there are many, many quotes and speeches from him saying exactly this. The idea...
No, there's not.
that Martin Luther King Jr. would have been outraged by the beliefs of critical race theory is ridiculous, especially since critical race theory is based in critical theory, and critical theory is based in Marxian analysis of class. Given the fact that MLK was a socialist, yeah, I don't know. Feel like he would have gotten along just fine with.
He wasn't a
these
socialist. Here, we have it right here, and I want to thank Adam Brendan for having this on his Twitter so that I could bookmark it. But from MLK's own words, after our condemnation of the philosophy of communism has been eloquently expressed, we must, with positive action, seek to remove those conditions of poverty, insecurity, injustice, and racial discrimination which are the fertile soil in which the seed of communism grows and develops. He was a very anti-communist. Right here we have, how should a Christian view communism from MLK? And he gives this Bible quote, "Let judgment roll down as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream." All of this, as you can see, is from Strength to Love by Martin Luther King Jr. So no, Martin Luther King Jr. wasn't a socialist. He didn't support socialism. And don't say there's a distinction between communism and socialism. We both know that they're the same thing, or at least the way you would implement them is the same.
Critical race theorists, Martin Luther King was both wrong and naive.
Wait, they did it. They brought him up. Conservatives love to bring up Martin Luther King Jr. because he's like a dead puppet they can wave in the face of living black people to tell them they're being uppity. That's the reason why conservatives claim to love MLK. They get to shove their hand up his puppet corpse ass and wave him around in front of, you know, like that.
It's so fucking disrespectful to people, Vaush. Like, that's not what conservatives do. They really do respect this man.
That's the only reason. Oh, they despised him at the time. And they despise him privately, too. 100%. Dennis...
No, they don't.
Prager, probably in his private moments, thinks very, very little of Martin Luther King Jr., to say the least. They still hate him, but they know they can weaponize him, so...
Didn't realize Vaush was a professional mind reader.
They go for it.
White Americans can never judge blacks by the content of their character. They can only judge them, always unfavorably, consciously or unconsciously, by the color of their skin.
So, their understanding of critical race theory is every interaction is only race, and it's impossible to think of anything but race, and white people are racist no matter what they do.
That's not...
That sure is a convenient...
That's not their understanding. Their understanding is that race plays a part in every interaction, and thus it has an impact on every interaction.
Straw man to present if you're trying to get your conservative audience to be absolutely terrified of an idea. Why do conservatives fear critical race theory so much?
Ironically, not since the Aryan obsession in Germany in the 1930s and 1940s.
No, oh no, don't do it! You're gonna die, you madman! Give it!
Or South African apartheid in the second half of the 20th century, has the social movement been so obsessed with race.
Yeah!
Where's the law, Vaush?
Oh, baby! That feels good. Hey, I like how they're relating Nazi Germany.
Apartheid in the second half of the 20th century, has the social movement been...
Oh man, it's really funny because isn't the typical conservative line basically like pro South American apartheid? Every
No.
time conservatives bring up South Africa, not South America, South Africa. Every time Americans bring up South Africa, it's like, damn, things sure were better back in the 80s, you know? Because they circulate that one story of like white farmers being attacked or something like that.
Again, where's
Yeah.
the lie?
Yeah,
I mean,
Reagan
it's pretty
defended South
terrible over
American
there.
apartheid. Yeah, conservatives loved
South
South American
African.
apartheid.
South African.
But again, this is how the wheel turns. Conservatives will defend every, did I say South American again? South African, sorry. We just have so many Brazilian fans in the audience. I'm always thinking of you. Conservatives will defend every genocide, every apartheid state, everything bad about the world, but then the moment public opinion turns, they will not only pretend that they never did that, they will then use the ghosts and the heroes of that.
It's so fucking disingenuous, man. I mean, yeah, conservatives have believed bad things, but people can change. I mean, the left surely changed.
Civil rights movement to shame the leaders of the current civil rights movement. That's what they do. They learn from history only insofar as they can puppet the corpses of men who would have had them peacefully and civilly charged in court.
With race. Critical race
And it's you with the fucked up view of MLK, not conservatives.
theory is then, in a very real sense, a counter-American revolution.
Oh.
But that's a positive, not a negative to those who subscribe to the theory. The American experiment was given a 400-year tryout, and it doesn't work. So let's scrap it. That's what they believe.
Scrap what? What components of this belief? It's incredible.
All of them, Vaush. That's what critical race theorists believe. Critical race theorists believe that that racism is so ingrained in the systems that they have to be completely thrown out and rebuilt from the ground up and replaced.
How for a YouTube channel that purports to give you university tier education, how little they actually say about any of the shit they're talking about. I mean, what is this?
Is that what you believe?
I admit, it is a simple take, but it's not incorrect. And for the average American, it's done in a way that they can understand. They're, like you said, this is a legal theory, and not everyone is up to par for dissecting a legal theory as it is written. So, I mean, shouldn't you support, like, information being given to the common people like this?
I'm going to guess that most of you don't. So how do we stop critical race theory before it infects the brains of too many decent Americans, especially young people?
Hey, here's a question, just out of curiosity. If critical race theory is literally just, we want to destroy America, all white people are racist, everything is about race, then how exactly did it become a mainstream view?
Because it's pretty fucking subversive. Literally, snuck in and infected like all of our systems. It didn't come right out and say half of the stuff. I mean, it's brainwashed an entire generation of people into being Marxist through the educational system. And slowly and surely, it built its way up, leading people along, giving them just a little bit more information when it thought it was willing to accept them. That's how subversive systems work. They don't come right out and tell you everything out front. And critical race theory definitely falls under this category of a subversive system.
Like, if it's that stupid, I mean, if there's no merit to it whatsoever, how exactly did this spread? Now, of course, if you ask this question, what you get fundamentally is anti-Semitism. They respond with the cultural Marxism conspiracy.
Now, you see, I just answered that question, and I didn't say a single damn anti-Semitic thing. So, again, Vaush, you're being disingenuous.
Conspiracy theory, previously known as cultural Bolshevism. The idea that some nefarious group of people with a different set of interests have infiltrated our academic systems. And
I mean, yes, that framing is not a great way to frame this. I sincerely believe most of these people think they're doing the right thing. It's just they're consequential consequentialists, like you. They want to win. They were willing to deceive to win. People can be dicks.
And are using it to disseminate anti-white, anti-Western propaganda to destroy America. And if you run that down far enough, it becomes pretty clear just how flimsy their use of the term Judeo-Christian really is.
And turns us into something we have never been and shouldn't ever want to be. The answer is simple. Refuse to accept it. Don't be intimidated by the heads I win, tails you lose logic of this self-destructive, America-hating, anti-reality idea. Don't be bullied into thinking that you're racist when you know you're not, or that you're a victim when you know you're not.
Ooh, throwing it out there, sad black lady. You're not a victim. Get the fuck out of here. Come on.
He's right. What good comes from teaching people that they're victims? They're not going to try if they think they're always going to fail because of some kind of societal structure that you think is racist, or that they think is racist, I guess. So no, you shouldn't be telling people they're victims. You should be telling people that they can overcome adversity. Obviously, we're not all born the same. Like I said earlier, I was born in Appalachia to a poor family of coal miners. And you obviously were born out, well, I don't know about born out there, but you obviously went to a Beverly Hills high school. So you, I would say that we're from two totally different places. So yes, we had different obstacles, and we're both white. And the same is true of black people. It's hard to imagine that Obama's children are going to do poorly, but people in the inner city will. It really doesn't have a lot to do with color, does it? It seems to have more to do with poverty. Now, maybe, definitely racial tensions in the past and, even slavery played a role in impoverishing these communities, but I mean, what do you want to do? We're trying to help through welfare. It takes time.
No, you're not. Defend yourself while you still can.
What? You still can't? Is this The Walking Dead? Jesus. What?
It's pretty dire. You can try to undermine it all you want, but to an American, it is very antithetical to our beliefs and values. Maybe not to a Californian, at least not to you, but to a lot of Americans it is.
Save yourself. Oh, there's still hope. Christ, that's a 10.
Literally brainwashing children, so you think that's not going to have a social impact? I don't know what to tell you.
Into fascism, right? Every threat has to be escalated to some kind of civilization-ending crisis because it's the only way they can motivate their followers to believe and adhere to the fear necessary for them to subscribe to fascist ideas.
I'm James Lindsay, founder of New Discourses for PragerU University.
Yeah. So in summary, James Lindsay is a giant pussy with a huge victim mentality, and I would love to talk to him sometime. And
Okay.
I know you're going to hear this, Lindsay, because you were never not on your phone. Clips of it are probably being recorded and posted to your DMs right now. Okay, so anytime you want to talk, buddy. You ran away from that first conversation with your tail between your legs. It was pretty cringe, Anyway, the reason why conservatives fear critical race theory so much is because it is fairly effective at identifying racist institutions, which conservatives want to continue.
No, it's because it's fucking brainwashing kids. That's why they fear it. They don't want it brainwashing kids into becoming Marxists.
To exist because they are racist.
Or into thinking that just because they're white, they're oppressors, that they are racist. Or thinking just because they're black, that they're victims, and that they're never going to be able to succeed in a white society.
James Lindsay. That's the only reason why. Okay? The idea that some relatively obscure and rarely applied academic theory would end up commanding
obscure theory that's literally that they acknowledged and that Delgado acknowledged in 1996 or 1995, whenever that book came out, had already infiltrated pretty much every institution in America. But yes, it's just an obscure legal theory.
So much of the conservative brain space that the President of the United States of America would be shit-talking it, multiple times in speeches, like President Trump, is ridiculous. And the reason they do it is because they fear it. If anything, conservative fear of critical race theory single-handedly justifies the existence of its theory because all the racists in society are anti-it.
And here's the crux of it, whatever. Vaush thinks every conservative is a racist, so if conservatives don't like this thing, he has to love it. He doesn't need to know anything more about it. He doesn't need to learn about it. He just needs to know that conservatives hate it. Good enough for him.
I mean, it must clearly be good at identifying racism, you know? It'd be like if you hear about a civil rights leader, and the first thing you hear about them...
You know what else conservatives hate? They really don't like to burn alive or die from poison, but I guess those must be good things just because conservatives hate them.
Is that they're despised by every neo-Nazi group in America, the Ku Klux Klan, and the Republican Party, you know? The first thing you'd think...
Yeah, neo-Nazi... the Republican neo-Nazi Party.
Think about that person is, they must have some pretty cool ideas, you know? They must be all right. Can we get a quick explain like I'm 5 explanation of critical race theory? Yeah, critical race theory is really simple, guys, okay? So,
oh, I can't fucking wait.
Think of critical race theory as a bedrock set of assumptions upon which people build other ideas, because that's how academia tends to work, okay? Now, critical theory, which is a Marxian concept, is the idea of, and this is usually applied in a class concept, is the idea of understanding society by describing and analyzing the power relations between different groups within that society, okay? So a critical theorist, for example, might take a look at the Keystone Pipeline or the 99% or Occupy Wall Street movement, and they might take a look at it and analyze it based on the competing interests and challenges posed by different economic classes. Critical race theory does this, but it does it in a racialized sense rather than a class-based sense. So critical race theory is when you're critical of racism. Critical race theory, put very, very simply, is why did Ferguson happen the way Ferguson...
Oh my god. That's... No, you're ignoring like entire aspects of the theory. The part about how there's no empirical data. Like, that there's no truth. That you can't know truth. That everyone's truth is just as important as anyone else's. Which is pretty at odds with how we function as a society. You left all that out. Maybe you'll get to it, I don't know.
Happened, you know? Why did things happen that way? Why, you know? There are many sociological lens of analyses. One of them, for example, is what is it? Oh god, it's been a while since I graduated. Structural functionalism. So a structural functionalist would analyze Ferguson and all the terrible stuff that happened there by trying to explain the ways in which these anomalous reports on racism refer back to some underlying social need. Why are cops racist? Why do the police behave the way they do? Why do city governments allocate their resources the way they do? Well, they do so because there's an underlying social utility. Structural functionalist theory is very useful. I find that it can be a little bit overly accepting of problems, where if something exists, it must exist because it has a purpose, and if it has a purpose, then it's defensible, at least in some respect, and I disagree with that fundamental assumption. Again, we're simplifying a bit here. We have symbolic interactionists. Symbolic interactionism theory is much more interpersonal, it's less systemic.
I mean, you couldn't define critical race theory, so now you're going to define other theories? I don't know what you're doing.
It's about analyzing the ways in which iconography, symbols, styles can relate to the psychology of a person. So this might be a conversation held around the Blue Lives Matter flag, you know? What does the Blue Lives Matter flag mean? What images, what concepts is it meant to evoke? Or do we look at it and do we think that we're comforted? Do we feel fearful? What does it mean to us? What did that...
The Blue Lives Matter flag, put simply, is a rejection of the leftist narrative that all cops are bastards. That's all it is. I don't consider it a very tactful rejection, but that's what it is.
They mean when they produced it. These are just ways of analyzing a situation. And then we have critical race theory. And a critical race theorist might say, for example, the reason Ferguson is the way it is because the entrenched power systems within this city are ones which predominantly benefit white people. And it has been the antagonism between those who have held that racial power and those who have not held that racial power that has kept this city in the position that it is. The problems have arisen because of the antagonism between these groups. That's the basic premise of a critical race theorist. In reality, if you want...
You see, you're kind of ignoring why they would make this claim. There's undoubtedly some truth that racism happens. And they're looking at some of the statistics from Ferguson. I do think that the police office, or the police could have been managed better. But you're ignoring why the critical race theorists object to all of this. Critical race theorists are anti-liberal. They don't like liberalism, as in they don't like American values. So they want to tear society down. They start every conversation with the presupposition that racism has occurred here. So even in cases where they don't, they're already looking through that lens. That's going to give a pretty warped view of reality.
Want to truly understand an issue, you have to understand it from all sociological perspectives. One perspective isn't enough to fully understand an issue, but different perspectives give different levels of utility and different...
You see, I don't agree with this. I don't think that you need to look at it through every sociological lens to understand if something is good or bad. Looking at critical race theory, for example, I don't think it's a good lens for anybody to use because it rejects empiricism. It rejects the very way that we compare ideas to each other. You know, that you can't look for validity anymore if everyone's truth is equal. So no, it's not a good lens to use for anybody. It's a detrimental lens, and it's going to lead to harm. It's going to lead to people thinking things that aren't true, which a lot of leftists do.
Different situations. So just be open-minded and think about the ways in which different perspectives can lend some understanding to a complicated situation.
There we go. That's the Vaush video. Now he recorded this back in May 5th, 2021. So maybe he's taken a little more time to learn about the subject, but I highly doubt it. He didn't seem to actually address any of James Lindsay's points. He just attacked PragerU or attacked James Lindsay, and that's not how you participate in a discussion. But then I guess he's just trying to make y'all laugh. I don't know, but he didn't refute anything. He agreed with most of James Lindsay's points, even after he would be like, no, oh no, and then just completely say the exact same fucking thing that James Lindsay did, using slightly different wording. Vaush, you don't understand critical race theory. I don't know if you'll ever see this. Probably not, but you don't get it. Or you didn't then. Maybe you do now. But you didn't then. I noticed something else while going through the recording of this video, and that's that Vaush accused conservatives of basically using a dead guy to validate their claims. But the funny part is that he immediately followed up with this by doing the exact same fucking thing. By saying MLK Jr. was a socialist, and that he would have had all of these people who object to critical race theory civilly tried and arrested. Like, we don't know what you fucking mean, Vaush. The difference is, Vaush has nothing to back up his claim. Other than the fact that MLK Jr. backed a lot of different social programs to help address injustice. Something that, well, conservatives admittedly don't do quite enough of, but they don't oppose it on principle. They just think that too much welfare can have a negative effect, which there's an argument to be had about that, but that's a totally different discussion. If you do want to learn about critical race theory, I highly suggest you read Richard Delgado's book on the subject. It's called An Introduction to Critical Race Theory. A little bit old now, but it sums up the theory pretty well. It came out in the 1990s. Richard Delgado is one of the founders of the theory, so this, he's not even a critic. I'm advising you to read a proponent of the theory and develop your own opinions. In my opinion, all of his arguments are trash, but how could they not be? Critical race theory rejects empiricism. It's pretty difficult to defend a theory scientifically if it rejects science. Anyway, I'll have a much longer video about critical race theory out at some point. I am practically done with it. It's a lot more in depth than anything I've said here. I hope to see you then.